see about this? Can you hear me now? And that sounds like a commercial, doesn't it? If somebody can type in the chat somewhere, or Bria Rose, if you can let me know that you can hear me. Okay, well, you know what? My background is in musical theater. So that was a fabulous dress rehearsal, and now we're going to do the real thing, okay? So everybody, places, preset again, okay? All righty, here we go, take two. And, you know, there's never a take two for a live performance, right? So anywho, welcome to Sacred Sex with Trish. I am your host, Trish Causey, and I am so happy to be here on Oneness Talk Radio because I have watched this channel. I have watched Sri and Kira for a long time. And I was stunned when I was asked to bring a show about sexuality to Oneness Talk Radio. And it just so happens I already had a show, Sacred Sex with Trish, that ran for 12 episodes on another network. And it combines two of my most favorite things, and that includes spirituality and sexuality. And add in that I'm a composer, and I compose meditation music for my orgasm training program. And you know what? It's all three things that I love: music, sexuality, and spirituality. And so in case you haven't already guessed, yes, we will actually be talking about sex on this show. There is nothing wrong with consensual sex between adults. It's absolutely beautiful and normal. And as a tantrika, I can tell you that there are actually very special, very specific energy channels between the genitals and the heart. They actually bypass other energy channels. The heart and the genitals are actually meant to go together. And I think if you've ever been able to experience truly loving sex, then you know just how incredible it is, and nothing else really compares to that. And so that's what we're going to be talking about a lot in this series. With this show, what I've noticed is that there's a lot of spiritual bypassing about sexuality in the spiritual community. And oh, if I was supposed to do more of an intro, let me know. I'm just going to get right into it. But I want to hear from you. So please type in the chat. Let me know that you're watching. Let me know where you're from. Go ahead and ask questions, because that is what my show is all about. It's about helping you and answering your questions to the best of my ability. Okay, so in talking about sexuality and spirituality, I see a lot of spiritual bypassing in the spiritual community, and I predict it's going to increase as we go along, because we are in the time of the Great Awakening, right? And as more people jump onto the spiritual, not religious bandwagon, which, yay, it's a great bandwagon. However, people will tend to bring their religious dogma with them, sometimes not meaning to. And what that means is that they're leaving official, institutionalized 3D religion, but which is all man-made anyway, right? But they're bringing some of those indoctrinations and a lot of the guilt and the shame and the blame and judgment into the spiritual community when it comes to sex, sexuality, being sexual. You know, it can even homophobia, you know, that kind of thing. And so it is really, really important that we have conversations about sexuality and spirituality, because 3D society loves to talk about sex. Sex is used to sell everything, right? From, you know, microwavable bowls of rice to actual, you know, sex scenes in Hollywood films, etc., or TV shows. Game of, we won't go there. So in order for us to really make peace with a lot of what the 3D has taught us, we have to be open to discussing it. And sometimes that means being triggered. You know, anytime you have a trigger, that means that there's something for you to heal, right? It doesn't mean the other person has to stop saying what they're saying. It just means that's something for you to heal, right? Because everything that you experience is a mirror reflection of what the energy that you've already put out into the universe. It's just coming back to you, and your spirit team is likely trying to help you. And one of the most pervasive traumas, crimes, but one of the most pervasive traumas in 3D society is sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual trauma, whether it's one time or repeated sexual trauma, repeated sexual abuse at school, in the locker rooms, in the family. There's a lot of trauma that needs to be healed, and we cannot heal it if we are bypassing it. So that's the tough love right there. And I'm sorry if that was a downer, but I really thought it was important that we need to understand that we need to talk about some of this stuff. And some of this stuff is a little tough at times, but it's really beautiful too. It's really amazing too. And for me, as someone who's experienced both sides of this coin, I can tell you it's absolutely worth doing the healing. It's absolutely worth facing those triggers so that you can really see how beautiful sex is, how beautiful sex can be, you know, whether it's with a partner or by yourself. So that kind of brings us into the next thing, which is, yes, not only are we going to actually talk about sex, but we're actually going to talk about the sexual anatomy. We're going to talk about all those bits and pieces and parts that I can't even talk about on Facebook because I get thrown in Facebook jail for using Latin words that are, you know, the anatomical parts of our body. Your body is beautiful. You know, I can't imagine, you know, anyone who's truly anchored into 5D shaming the body, right? The body's beautiful. The body is amazing. Some of my clients call me the penis guru. And it's because I am completely in awe of the body, and I love men, and I think men are beautiful and wonderful. And I think the big part of this equation of healing is allowing men to heal on so many levels when it comes to sex, sexuality, the idea of masculinity that is tied to sex, the idea of masculinity that is tied to their genitals, which they call junk. The idea of their manhood, as it is actually called, their manhood. So there's so much woven into our armor of who we've been told we need to be, and you know, our experiences that have led us to build up whatever brick walls to protect ourselves. It takes a lot of love to break down some of those walls and get back to who we really are. And we are source energy in the physical. And there's nothing wrong with that, which means if you do come up from a religious background that says that you are made in the image of God, God with a capital G, which I don't use, but I'll use it for right now. If you believe that you are made in the image of God, how can sex be bad? How can your genitals be shameful? How can any part of this be dirty or bad or something you're not supposed to do and have fun with? Now, of course, I'm talking about consensual sex. And for the purposes of legalities and disclaimers, I'm just going to say, this is all about consensual sex between adults, right? But I think it's really, really important that adults, parents, be able to start having conversations about sex and sexuality with their children from the spiritual perspective that is not weighed down by religious dogma, which tends to be not only anti-sex, but anti-woman, right? So I hope you can still hear me. But I am very, very grateful for everyone who has participated already in this show, because I have a group on Facebook that I invite you to join. It's facebook.com/groups/Sacred Sex with Trish. It's all one word, no hyphens or anything. And in there, I have been asking the members of the group questions about their perspective of sacred sex. So let's go ahead and talk about that, shall we? So when I asked people about their idea of sacred sex? What is sacred sex to them? It was so interesting. The questions were, the answers were actually really beautiful. And it was mostly men. And they were responding that to them, sacred sex was sex that you take your time, you slow down, you enjoy it more, that you enjoy the journey more than the destination. And after about 20 responses, that was it. There was only one man who made a comment that was kind of rude, but that was from his perspective. That's, he just, like, get in there, get it done. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, well, that could be spiritual too. I'm not judging, but I just thought it was funny, that he had more of a typical idea of, what we think about men's attitude towards sex, just get in there and get it done. It's like, how do you actually enjoy that, right? And so the big thing that was missing, though, is that not one person acknowledged the sacred part of sex. Sacred sex isn't just about the sex. Sacred sex isn't just about slowing down and enjoying the journey. Wow, it really is more amazing when you do that, of course. But the idea of sacred sex is that it is sex that has a particular emphasis on the divine. The word sacred actually means holy. I mean, it comes from, a long tradition of words that go back to, while it does not come from a root word that actually means God, it doesn't come from a word that means God exactly. But the words saint, sanctify, and sacred all have the same root. And it all has to do with making any enterprise or person and associating them with divinity, with being divine, making something holy. So the emphasis is really about something here in the physical and making it holy, or seeing it holy, seeing it as divine, just wanting to have that connection with the divine through something or a person here in the physical. So when we talk about sacred sex, we really are talking about the divine in the physical being experienced through sex, the sexual organs, through sexuality. And there is nothing wrong or shameful about that, especially consenting adults and all that jazz. So I just thought it was interesting that maybe this is the segue for the 3D, is that if sacred sex to the 3D, the muggles, I call them muggles, but I'll try to be nice. But to the 3D muggles, if sacred sex as a starting point is slow it down, really enjoy it, really communicate, really look in each other's eyes, that is such an improvement over the one night stand, the hookup, backseat of the car, quickie, I mean, unless that's what you like, and you're calling on Shiva and Kali while you're doing it. I mean, that certainly can be sacred sex, because Kali's pretty powerful. But the idea here is that, this isn't about controlling people and what they do. And this certainly is not about shaming anyone who still is in a pattern or a lifestyle of one night stands and hookups and all of that jazz. They will find their way, because even the most ardent hookup artist gets tired of that at some point. You just can't keep that up for years, you just get tired of it. And when you are on a path of healing, especially, those kinds of one night stands and hookups just to try and bypass your healing, that gets old too. And so what winds up happening actually for a lot of people is what happened with me when I was trying to make orgasms easier and trying to make them bigger and better and just easier so they didn't take forever. I wound up going into brahmacharya. I didn't mean to. Brahmacharya is kind of like sacred celibacy. And I wound up just really getting into my body and exploring my body and seeing what my body can do. What is my body capable of? And it was no less than astounding. I mean, to this day, I am just amazed at what the body can do. And then adding on to really studying the anatomy, both the female and male anatomy, and of course, intersex, and the differences in the anatomy and the changes in anatomy for trans people as well. But the body's amazing, and the body is designed for pleasure. And so, again, going back to, if you really do believe that you are made in the eye of God and in the image of God, and then obviously God likes to have a good time because your body is freaking amazing and is made for pleasure. You are supposed to be happy. You are supposed to be just in awe of your experience here. It's not supposed to be so awful and bad and hard. And I know, we all know from the Ascension perspective, humanity's had a really tough road the past 12,000 years, 10,000, 12,000 years. But we're on track. We're on the road to getting back to who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be here in the physical. And we are supposed to be happy. And sex is definitely one of those ways. So I do have, let me turn my phone back on. And for those of you who are just joining, hey, I'm Trish. It's nice to see you. And if you would please leave a little comment down in the chat. I would love to know your name. If you have any questions, you can use an alias, y'all, please. If you do not, because this is dealing with sex, if you do not feel comfortable using your real name, that's totally fine with me. You can use, I know that's kind of hard to do on Facebook and YouTube, but if you would like to use an alias or some kind of anonymous, that's perfectly fine with me. And in fact, if you go to my website, trishcausey.com/sacred sex with Trish, all one word, no spaces, dashes, doodads, or whatever, trishcausey.com/sacred sex with Trish, you can ask me questions ahead of time and you can choose a pseudonym at that time. And then I would be happy to answer your question here on the show. And that way you can protect your anonymity. Okay. All right. But I did get a few great questions in the Sacred Sex with Trish Facebook group. So feel free to check that out. But this first question is a sacred partnership similar to a soulmate? Are they the same concept or completely different or somewhere in between? Most people are familiar with the concept idea of a soulmate, but how does one define a sacred partnership? I think that is a fabulous question. So, is a sacred partnership similar to a soulmate? Now, I'm going to say something that a lot of people may not like or agree with. That's okay. That's kind of how I roll, actually. That's my life. So if the idea of something is sacred, is something that is imbued with divinity and that it is holy, a sacred partnership is going to be a partnership that is rooted in a connection to the divine. Full stop. Because when you put the word sacred on there, that's what it means. And so a sacred partnership could be any relationship where you are in partnership with someone with the idea that source energy, creator, mother, goddess, God, etc., mother, father, goddess, God, is a central part of that relationship and that partnership. And that sacred partnership, for all intents and purposes, that could be a business partnership, right? But I know we're talking about sex. But anyway, so that sacred partnership, it could be something like fuck buddies, right? so that as people who come together only to have sex, but if there is the concept that we're coming together in a sacred union in that way, that is absolutely possible. I mean, that's exactly what tantric sex and tantric sex rituals actually are about. It's not just about the relationship, the sex relationship within the marriage, let's say. It's actually about experiencing the divine through another person through the act of sex, Hyros, Gamos, Maituna, and all of that. So when, I'm so sorry, there's like an air current, it keeps blowing my hair in my face, I'm so sorry. So for tantric sex, this is a big part of that. And the tantras were amazing. They kind of evolved out of the Vedic scriptures. And quickly, I will say that if your tantric practice does not include the divine, does not include gods and goddesses, then it's not tantra. I mean, there is so much not tantra in the United States. It's really shameful, in my opinion. But I'm not going to go there. I'm trying not to judge. But tantra is very specific, and it is a very specific path. It is not just about sex. But the idea behind tantric sex is that you will see the divine in anyone. And this was huge coming from the Vedic culture, with the caste system, where there's an entire caste that's considered the untouchables, and they weren't even considered human beings. And yet within Tantra and the Tantric practice, and especially within the Tantric sex rituals, that you would actually have two people of different castes coming together to have sex. And that was absolutely taboo outside of the Tantric system, outside of the temple. I mean, this stuff had to be done very much in secret. And so any sacred partnership is going to have some element of the divine, worshiping the divine, or at the very least, seeing the divine in the other person. And in tantric sex rituals, that's one of the things you do, is that, for instance, the male is going to call in the male aspect, let's say Shiva, or Purush. And once he has embodied that divine male aspect, God, right? Male God, then he is then able to see through that filter of his divine self. He's able to see the divine in the woman, and to see her as a living goddess. She is the living embodiment of the goddess. And of course, the goddess she is the supreme mother. She gives everything, she births everything. And so, if there is not that aspect of divinity, source energy, God, goddess, those kinds of elements, then it's not a sacred partnership in the truest form of the word sacred. Okay. So then soulmates can be, a soulmate relationship is absolutely two people who are in a soul tribe, and they find each other and they come together, and they can have they can be very much asleep. They can be very asleep. They may not have any concept of God, source energy. They could be atheist or whatever. That may be the path that they chose for this lifetime, right? And in doing so, they come together because they're just drawn to each other, but they don't understand why. And so that's just, that can be a soulmate thing. So yeah, they can absolutely be atheist and just have great, amazing sex where they really feel this connection, and the sex is probably great. And maybe they don't understand the connection so much. They might actually just chalk up the connection to, to body chemistry. They may say science. And I love science. Science is great. My father was a physicist. So, I'm all for science, but I do know that sometimes spirituality has better answers than science. So let me take a sip of water really quickly. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm sorry. And this other person says, I've never been in a loving, intimate situation with anyone, and I don't want to try until I go somewhere where it is safe to even look at men naked. Well, this is someone who's had some trauma. I do know that she's had trauma. And it is very difficult to open up your heart and to open up your body after trauma. It is very difficult to see the divine in anyone when you've been violated. And for that person, I would just say, there is no rush. There is no rush for you to get out into the world and start having sex. I mean, TV, film, media, commercials, social media, reality TV shows, they all want you to think that everybody's having great sex but you. And that is not the truth. And I know this because when men write into me, sometimes women, but it's for some reason I have a large male following, and when they write into me, a lot of them will say that I haven't had sex in years. I haven't had sex. A lot of men are actually as afraid of women in terms of starting the conversation as women are. Michael, hello. I just answered your question. If you are just joining, I am just now seeing your question in the chat. And I answered your question from the Facebook group, but you have a little bit different slant on this. So let me get to that. Is it possible to have more than one soulmate at one time? Or is it soul, S-O-L-E, mate? And what is the tantric stance on multiple partners? Well, is it possible to have more than one soulmate at a time? You have all kinds of soulmates in your life. You have all kinds. And I happen to know you're a twin flame. So you have your twin flame, and you can have soulmate partners. My higher self just tap dancing on my head. So you can have lots of soulmates as friends, as business partners, and as lovers. Yes, of course. You can absolutely have some poly relationship where you have more than two people within the relationship. And poly relationships of 3 and 4 actually work out really well. The people that I know who have those kinds of poly relationships, and it's more than just swingers. They're not swingers. They are actually, in a poly relationship. And let me see. So I'm so sorry. I thought that was about the show. It's not. So the poly relationships actually work out really well when the people are actually poly. And what this means is that most, if not all, of the people in the poly relationship are bisexual. There may be one that is definitely gay or definitely straight, but most of them, they tend to play with each other, right? So it's absolutely possible to have a working, functioning relationship of consenting adults that has multiple partners. As with anything, you want to be careful with having sex with people that you are not sure about their sexual history, and not just diseases, but also traumas. These are important questions to have. And this is why just jumping in the sack with somebody isn't necessarily the best for your overall health down the road, because you want to consider not just your sexual health, but your mental health, emotional, psychological health, and your spiritual health in this. So yes, you can have more than one soulmate at a time. Whether you choose to pursue that or not is up to you. The soulmate is going to come into your life based on whatever lesson you need to learn at that time, right? So if you whatever lesson you have, and like if it becomes like a love triangle where one soulmate comes in and you're in a relationship, and then somebody else comes in and that creates tension, that could be what's called a karmic. I don't like the term karmic because people, in our society, we think karma means, vengeance or bitchiness. And the word karma is a Sanskrit word that means action. So karma is neutral. But when a karmic comes into your life relationship wise, it usually is about something that you need to work on. And so that you can grow from. And this kind of stuff is usually past life stuff. I mean, this is like stuff that you are being triggered on purpose so that you can heal it. It just seems like you're being triggered to make your life like a living hell. Let's see, what was the other one? Or is it a soulmate, just one? Well, I know for me, and I'll talk about my experience briefly. Now that I've been with my twin flame, I can't be with anyone else. This is the most intense soulmate I will ever experience here in the physical, or probably any level. If he, says, hey, I, never want to see you again, and you never have sex again, or blah, 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 I'll be, oh my God, oh my God. And I'll be like, okay, well, now I'll just go be a nun, because there's no one for me but him. And I'm okay, because I've already done, brahmacharya. I've already done sacred celibacy. So I'm like, okay. I've got my orgasm training program. I'm good with orgasms. I don't need a man for orgasms. That's another thing too, is that when you stop looking for, great sex with another person because you can't have the great sex by yourself, you might want to, go to my website and check out my awesome program, Awakening Energy and Sound Orgasm Meditation, and learn how to have great orgasms all by yourself. And you can have great orgasms, full body. You can have them for hours. You can have spontaneous orgasms. I mean, I've learned how to not show that I'm having orgasms when I'm standing in line at the post office, and how to keep driving steadily when I'm, having an orgasm while I'm driving, because they just happen. So I'm good. He is my one and only from now on this lifetime. And I know other people who are like that as well. So again, that is your choice. So whether you choose to have several, or you choose to have only one, or you choose to have none, that's your choice. That's what you came here to do, is to make these kinds of decisions and to have certain experiences or not have certain experiences here in the physical. We are here to be masters over matter. We are here to create the heck out of a fabulous life. And whatever that means for you is what you should do for you. So then the last question is, what is the tantric stance on multiple partners? Well, ideally, the tantric sex is, it's not the daisy chain that you see in old porn and stuff. The idea of tantric sex. Let's talk about this. This episode is not about tantric sex, but but tantra is my life. I am a tantrika. Tantra is a way of being. But I would love to do an episode just on tantric sex, just so we can get some of this out of the way. But I'll be happy to talk about tantric sex anytime. So the word tantra is a compound Sanskrit word that it basically means expansion. A liberation, because that's moksha, but I like the idea of it being an instrument of expansion. And so Tantra is not something you do Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m. like yoga. And there's pretty much no real yoga in the United States either. That's another story for another time. But when it comes to tantric sex, Tantric sex is about the union of the masculine and the feminine. I mean, pretty much everything that we talk about here on the Ascension path and in the Ascension journey, the Tantrics had it, 1,500 years ago, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. They were talking about this stuff that's just now dawning on most of humanity here in the 21st century. And so it is about the person who holds the masculine energy, which those of us who talk about this a lot, we know it's not about gender, it's about who holds the masculine energy. So if you are the yang, if you are the projective energy, if you're the fire energy, then you may very well hold the masculine energy in your relationship. If you are the person who lives from your heart, you're very nurturing, you're very caring, then you are most likely the one with the feminine energy in the relationship. So there are a couple of different ways you can go about this when it comes to tantric sex. You can either call in, invoke, draw down, whichever term you like to use. You can either draw down the complementary energy to you. For instance, I might call in Saraswati. I might call in Lakshmi. I'm definitely going to call in Kali. Love her. And then the masculine might call in Shiva. Might call in Vishnu, Krishna, who knows? But the Hare Krishnas actually don't like sex, and I know that for a fact. So we'll just stick with Shiva on this. But when you draw in the energy that you want to mingle with, that loving energy, God, goddess energy individually, the sex in the physical is then the mirror to the union of the masculine and feminine that's already happened energetically, right? So when the man, let's just keep it masculines in the man and the feminines in the feminine, it's a little easier when we're talking, but in real life, the man might absolutely have the feminine energy, the woman might have the masculine energy. And of course, in same-sex couples, pick and choose, right? And so in tantric sex rituals, once you've drawn down the divine energy that you want to embody, and then you start that merging process in the physical through the sex, it's actually not about, okay, now we have sex. There's a whole lot that goes into it. There's a whole lot to the ritual that goes into it. For instance, the man is going to take one finger and gently, carefully, with the woman's very enthusiastic yes permission, which is how it should always be. And he's going to insert the finger, and he may do like a little bit of stroking, but it's going to be really soft. And it's only going to be like one knuckle deep, right? One knuckle deep. And then he's going to chant the name of the goddess that she chose. He's going to chant that 108 times. So you can imagine this is going to take a while. So tantric sex is absolutely not what you see in neo-tantra. It's not just about eye gazing, and it's not just about okay, well, let's just make this an exaggerated foreplay. I highly recommend lots of foreplay, but that doesn't make it tantric sex. Tantric sex, true tantric sex, is about embodying the divine. So the divine, your acknowledgement of the divine is going from the spiritual into the physical. And then the sex is the merging. The Maituna is the merging. The Hydroscamos, Vesica Pisces, it is the merging in the physical of a divine union that's already happened energetically. So I hope that makes sense. It's kind of hard to just kind of jump right into Tantra. Especially when there's so much misinformation about it. But thank you for that question, Michael. I know you are a deep thinker. You're a Libra, like I am. And we want to know all the information. One little tidbit is not enough for us. So thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate that very much. And I did get one more question before the show, so I want to make sure that I address it. But please go ahead. We have, we have about 15 minutes left in the show. So go ahead and type your questions in. I love hearing from you. If you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and type it into the chat. And the other question that came in was from a person named Ollie. And his question was, how do you keep the romance going? Basically, how do you keep the interest going? And so I'm going to give you the answer of what I actually think and feel. No, wait. I'm going to tell you what you want to hear, and then I'll tell you what I really think and feel. Because I know this person, I know what age he is. So let's just say 50s and older. This question that he asked, how do you keep the romance going? How do you, keep the interest going? Is oftentimes followed by, well, my wife is in menopause and her libido is tanked and we never have sex anymore. And we had such a great sexual relationship before, her hormones died and she went into menopause. So if it's that kind of issue where the interest isn't there because of a physiological reason, that's something that perhaps you can look into with a doctor or a naturopath. And I'm not giving you medical advice, but that would be something where you might want to see how you can assist the physical body to make sure that the physical body is prepared and wanting sex. And if the physical body is good to go, now we can address, say, the mental side of this, if that is actually what's causing the issues with not being as into it, having sex or being sexual as you used to be. So whenever somebody asks me, how do I keep the interest going in the relationship? I would want to ask, number one, what are your expectations? What are your expectations from the relationship? What are your expectations from the sex? How often do you expect to have sex? How often did you used to have sex? What changed? Was there a defining moment? Was there a situation that changed? Maybe there was a change in job. Maybe there was an injury and, was on crutches, or you had to heal from surgery or that kind of thing. Was there some kind of a physical trauma to the body that had to be healed? And then, of course, was there some kind of sexual trauma? So I would look at what are your expectations for sex in the future. And I would also look at what was your sex life like before? How often did you have sex? Was it really pleasurable to begin with? Was it something that you both look forward to begin with? Or was it just routine anyway? And maybe she's tired of pretending. I understand this. I talk a lot about my experiences on my blog, and because I do believe in transparency. But in my marriage, that's what I felt like I had to do. I didn't want sex. I didn't want sex with him, my husband at the time. I didn't want that at all. And so sex was like drudgery to me. And, but I knew that as long as I had sex, then my then husband, he didn't complain about bills. I learned that pretty quickly. And so once I no longer even cared about that, then I just, had no interest in sex, even though I kept pretending and, just kind of to keep the peace. And then one day he said something that just cut me to my core. And I knew, you're never touching me ever again. And these kinds of things affect women. Not that they don't affect men, but sometimes men can say things that cut us to the core and we can lose all interest. Done. Yeah. So I would look back and see, was there a situation? Was there an event? Was there a conversation? Was there an argument? Something that you can pinpoint exactly when the interest started dying. Okay. And if not, maybe you two are just growing in different ways. You growing in different ways, you're growing at different rates, and maybe you're just not growing together, you know? I don't know what the answer is for you, but those are the things that I would look for. I would look at the expectation. What are you expecting now? Is it because, you're retired, she's retired, and so now you have this kind of empty nest syndrome? So you find yourself, in this, a big house, and it's very quiet, and you don't have the time obligations of, ballet and piano and soccer and football and baseball and, and social engagements, maybe she's tired, So, without more information, that's all I can offer. But I hope that those are some starting points that will allow you to look a little further into how you can get your relationship back on track. As with anything, communication is priority. You have to be able to talk. You have to be able to express yourself. And when you come together to have these conversations, which, by the way, you don't start this conversation when you're unzipping your pants. Don't do that. All right. This is a conversation that needs to be held like in neutral territory, right? Like when you're at the park, or you're at, you're waiting for your dinner to arrive. Just have a very neutral conversation and say, hey, babe, I would really like to talk about this. But in any of these situations, when it comes to talking about relationships, it has to be on neutral ground. And I mean neutral. This is like tabula rasa. This is a blank slate. If you start bringing in the past, if you start bringing in all of your wants and needs and judgments and blame, and throwing in, well, this is what you did to hurt me, there's guilt and all that stuff, that's not going to get you anywhere. So a conversation is going to be about whatever has gone on. Where are we right now? And where do you want to go with this? Let me share with you where I would like to see this go. And can we do this together? I mean, that's the basis of any relationship, So without more information, that's the best I can do for right now. So are there any more, because we only have a few more minutes left in the show. Are there any other questions? I think I'm doing this right. I love this topic. And this, with Sacred Sex with Trish, this is the first time I've actually been able to really combine sexuality and spirituality. One of the reasons why I did not become a sex therapist is because I really didn't like the sex scene that's very common amongst, let me say, I don't want to say sex coaches, but the sex bloggers, let's say. My views on porn, they didn't like that. My views on vibrators, they didn't like that. And we'll be talking about all of that. So I hope you will send in your questions to me so that I can ask your questions, or just type them here in the chat. But again, if you want anonymity, you can always go to my website, trishcausey.com/Sacred Sex with Trish, all one word. And that way you can ask with a pseudonym, ask your questions. But I've never really been a part of that clique of sex bloggers and sex coaches, simply because I have a very, because I see things from the spiritual perspective, I have very specific thoughts about porn and BDSM and other things like vibrators. Stop using vibrators. You're damaging your nerves. So expand on porn. What makes it a bad thing? I would love to do a whole show on porn. I did that in the last series of Sacred Sex with Trish. We can jump right into that, but we only have a few minutes left of this show. And it's not that it makes it a bad thing, because again, that's judgment, right? Good, bad, this, that, right, wrong. I will just say that 99.999999999% of porn is absolutely not for your highest good. If you want to see something that is sexual, I would recommend erotica, something that is filmed beautifully, where people in the film are treated with respect. It's not a gangbang. The woman's not having her breast punched. Those kinds of things. What passes for regular porn nowadays would have been absolutely just you just didn't see it. Certainly not as readily as today. And the topic with porn actually goes into not just the porn itself, but the accessibility of porn, especially for young people, and what it's doing to them, and how it's shaping their ideas about what sex is like, what relationships are like, and that kind of thing. So if you, and the other thing with porn, because I only have a minute left. Oh my gosh. The other thing with porn is that if it's an addiction, and I've had people come to me and ask for help with their porn addiction, and I've helped them with that. Any kind of addiction where you are reliant on something outside of you in order to achieve a certain experience, a certain state, a certain high, a certain release, ultimately that is not healthy for you down the road, because that addiction, what can seem like a simple addiction that, I can give it up anytime. Well, over time, that actually can become something quite serious, where you're knocking over the pharmacy stand in order to get stuff. Yeah, we don't want to do that. It can go too far. So we could do a whole show on porn, but that just very briefly for anyone who wanted to know what I think about porn. Oh my God, I've got to go. But yes, erotica is beautiful and wonderful. I would hesitate to on the porn aspect of things, and we can talk about that in another show. So I am so grateful. I'm so grateful to be here and to be doing this show on, live on across Oneness Talk Radio's networks. And you can see the replays across my networks, and I will be blabbing like crazy this link as soon as it goes up. And I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, all of you who wrote in. Thank you to those of you who are in the Facebook group. Please join the Facebook group, Sacred Sex with Trish. And be sure to send me your questions ahead of time through my website. And of course, you can always type your questions here in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And as I close out my shows, I like to say, only love is real. And whenever you're thinking about sex, if you can keep that in the back of your mind, only love is real, you might make some different choices. I won't say better, but just different choices. So, all right, Bria Rose, gonna try and do this all proper like, but I am very grateful that y'all have been here. Thank you so much, y'all.